Everybody quit in 24 hours. But I went back to YouTube, learned to manage. Well, I got promoted 7 times. I got pretty good at it. And then I started up my own business. And yeah, fast forward just shy of a decade, I've been responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories.
Welcome to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today we have a very special guest, my friend Matthew Pollard, who is an internationally recognized consultant, an author, and best known as the rapid growth guy, which is something we all are trying to do, right? Is grow rapidly, especially in this really tough economy, with a portfolio of $5 million business success before at the age of 30, which is very difficult to do. Matthew's transformed over 3,500 struggling businesses into success stories. So that's why we have him on today, because we want to hear how that worked and what he did and how we can do the same here. Some of us are struggling, some of us are killing it, but we could always use some advice. Matthew, thank you so much for being here.
Mate, I'm ecstatic to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for being here. You know, a great place to start is tell us your story, right? You've been described as the real deal by Forbes, and it mentioned being the rapid growth guy. But before all of that stuff, what the hell were you doing, and how did you get to this point?
It's I think a lot of people always assume that when somebody's articulate and they've had a load of successes to their name, they were kind of destined for greatness. And I was probably the opposite of that. I mean, I had a reading speed of a 6th grader in late high school. I was super introverted, and truthfully, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. What actually happened was I discovered that I had what was called Irlen syndrome in late high school, which basically means I put on this funny pair of colored lenses, which definitely didn't help with my confidence. But of course, that allowed me to learn to read, not like everyone else, but start the process. And I just remember, I would hustle every day to get better and better. And I actually got into the top 20% of my state. But I mean, my family could see I was just exhausted, and I just had no idea what I wanted to do. So we all agreed I'd take a year off. Maybe some people at home have got kids that kind of took a year off to find themselves too, right? That was me. I took a year off to find myself, and I took a job at a real estate agency. And before you think I was the guy out selling, because, I mean, I struggle to talk to my own friends, let alone anyone else. I was the guy in the back office doing data entry, with that look on your face. Don't speak to me. I'm here to find myself. Well, what happened is 3 weeks into that job, my manager pulls me aside and he's like, Matt, I'm so sorry. We just got told by head office they're closing down this premise. You're out of work. I'd worked there 3 weeks. This is Australia at Christmas time. So for those people that are in America that don't know this, it's summer at Christmas time there. So everyone goes on holidays for a month. It's 20th of December. Everyone leaves. No one comes back till the 15th or 20th of January. So just nobody is hiring, except for these things called commission-only sales roles. And that was the most terrifying thing that made me who I am today. I remember there was only 3 jobs in the paper, and the only thing that made me call them is that I was terrified of telling my father that he broke his back 80 hours a week to support the family, that I'm out of work and I got nothing lined up. So I applied for all 3 jobs, and I got 3 job interviews. And then I was like, I got 3 job offers. And I'm like, maybe they see something in me I don't see in myself. And I remember taking this job doing business-to-business telecommunications sales. And I went in with a little bit of quiet confidence, right? I got 3 job offers. And the trainer's like, Matt, commission-only jobs, they just hire everyone. They just see who sticks, right? We just have this saying, we throw mud up against the wall and see who sticks. You're the mud. Not a great saying for me at the time.
Yeah.
So I remember after 5 days product training and not a single second of sales training, getting thrown on this road. It was called Sydney Road in Melbourne, Australia. Hundreds and hundreds of doors on each side, and getting told to just go sell, which sounded great, but nobody actually told me what to say. I didn't know how to sell. So I took a deep breath. I walked in to the first door and I was politely told to leave, which was a positive thing, because after that I was sworn at. I was told to get a real job, and that just happened door after door after door until I got to my 93rd door where I made my first sale. And I remember I made about $70, which, I mean, I was ecstatic for, at that point. But, I mean, that was more than I was earning. I was working at McDonald's before that, in my high school job. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this again tomorrow, though. Not the same way. But I wasn't willing to give up. So I made a decision that sales had to be a system. And I went, well, how am I going to learn that system? And I remember thinking, I can't read a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar book. It will take me a year to read them, let alone apply them. But then I jumped on YouTube and I typed in the word sales system, and all these videos came up. Well, long story short, I'd spend 8 hours a day applying what I learned, and then I'd rush home and spend 8 hours practicing. Every day I'd do that over and over again. Weekends I'd spend 16 hours practicing. Now, I'm not suggesting this to anyone else. There are smarter ways to do this, but That was what I did every day. But soon it was 71 doors, then 43 doors, then 18, then 9, then 3. And I remember getting it down to making a sale on average every 3 doors.
Wow.
And about 6 weeks in, my manager pulls me aside and he had that same puzzled look on his face. I thought I was going to get fired again. And I mean, I was the quiet guy. I handed my paperwork in downstairs. I didn't talk to anyone. I thought that maybe I'd done something wrong. He pulls out the national sales figures and he's like, Matt, we're a little bit befuddled by this. I mean, we just got our national report and it turns out you're the number one salesperson in the company. I mean, this was the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. It took 6 weeks. So he looks at me and he's like, if you can sell, I mean, Matt, you can manage. I don't know why people think that. I mean, for me, there was no way I could learn. I knew how to manage. They gave me 20 people. They said, don't worry, mud up against the wall. Everybody quit in 24 hours. Ooh. But I went back to YouTube, learned to manage. Well, I got promoted 7 times. I got pretty good at it. And then I started up my own business. And yeah, fast forward just shy of a decade, I've been responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories.
Wow.
So I guess my backstory is really about the fact that I learned systems and process for things like sales, like networking, because they didn't come natural to me. And that really has seeded the success of my entire future, really.
First of all, congratulations. That's incredible. I would say 98% of people would either not have taken those jobs, they would have been too good for it, or they would have quit within 1 to 3 days, right? So, and I can just imagine the kind of job it is. It doesn't sound like an easy job or a sexy job in any light. So congrats on that. What are the core principles or strategies you found effective in helping all these companies survive and thrive in achieving rapid growth? Like what do you look for?
You know, it's a really good question because what I find is originally I took great pride in the fact that I learned how to sell as an introvert. And I think especially in the technology sector, there are so many introverts there in that sector, or they overcomplicate the sales process with this obscene amount of jargon. I mean, you know, a lot of times I end up talking, you know, I do a lot of sales kickoffs. As a matter of fact, Selling Power Magazine just listed me as Sales Kickoff Speaker of the Year. And I just talk about removing the jargon and sharing stories that include the jargon, but, you know, far more of these emotional roller coasters, very similar to the story of how you met your husband or wife, right? These most emotionally compelling stories, not just jargon. But truthfully, I think that if you start with sales, you've kind of already lost, right? Because if people see you as a commodity, like there's probably a lot of MSPs that, you know, that are listening to this. And I find that MSPs, they go in and they just start talking about technology and they're just like every other MSP as far as the vendor's concerned. So they're forced to fight on price. And, you know, I will tell you, and you know what, actually, let me give you an example totally outside the scope of technology. And then I'll come back to some real tech examples. But there was a language coach that I worked with that was out of California. And she taught kids and adults Mandarin. So if you think that, you know, that technology is commoditized, wait until you try language consulting. Like there were people moving into her area trying to charge $30 to $40 an hour for private consultation. There were people in China offering to do it for $12 an hour on Craigslist. And now there's technology in San Francisco. I'll teach you Mandarin, you teach me English. We just won't charge anyone anything. So she comes to me and she's like, Matt, can you tell me how to sell more effectively to close deals at the $50 to $80 price I'm used to? And I mean, she was losing current clients. She was struggling to get new ones. And I said, look, let's first avoid the battle altogether. So what I did is I looked at all the clients that she worked with over the years. And what I realized is there were 2 people specifically she helped with far more than just language consulting. These were executives being relocated across to China. And she helped them understand things like the difference between e-commerce in China and the Western world, the importance of respect. Like you can't learn the language. You've got to reduce your accent, how to handle a business card, why it matters so much, and the importance of rapport in China. Like they want to meet with you 5 or 6 times, probably see you drunk over karaoke once or twice before they even discuss business, as opposed to like at the end of 45 minutes here saying, do you want to move forward and getting yes, no, or do you want to think about it, right? So I was like, you're doing so much more for these people than just language tuition. What are you doing? And what I find is people get so stuck in their functional skill. So for the people listening, I promise you, no one continues to pay your bill or recommends you to someone else unless you provide something that they see as uniquely valuable. Like no one says, oh my gosh, you've got to try this company. They do everything exactly the same as everyone else. It just doesn't happen. Everyone's got unique competencies. And for her, Wendy, this was what hers were. And I said, is it fair to assume you're stuck in your functional skill? What if we were just saying that you were going to be able to make these people more successful in China? And she's like, that's the point, right? I said, great. Then let's call you the China Success Coach. Forget about Mandarin education for a second. Let's create what we ended up calling the China Success Intensive. which worked out to be a 5-week program that she worked with the executive, the spouse, and any children being relocated to China. This is what I call a Trojan horse package, a really short-term deliverable with such a high reward that they'll continue to hire you for everything later. This works amazingly well in the technology space as well. So she's like, well, I love the idea, but who do I sell it to? What she's asking is, who do I go networking to meet? Who do I digitally market to? And I said, well, who do you think? Everyone always thinks the obvious. The executive was her first choice. And I know, I was terrified moving from Australia to the US. That was terrifying for me. But I said, it's not your ideal client. She's like, well, then the company would pay. Makes sense. They've got millions of dollars often riding on an executive being successful. I said, I don't think so, though. I think your ideal client is actually the immigration attorney. Now she looks at me like I'm speaking a foreign language. I'm like, think about it. These people make $5,000 to $7,000 for doing all the visa and paperwork, the bureaucracy that comes with that. They'd be lucky to make $3,000, especially after they pay often to get a client, which isn't cheap. I said, so just offer them $3,000 for a simple introduction. So instead of going networking for clients, she went networking to meet immigration attorneys. They love the idea, like double my income for a simple introduction. Sure, what have I got to say? She just had them say, congratulations, you've now got your visa. I just want to double check that you're as ready as possible to be relocated to China. And she would just have them respond. Obviously, the executive would say something like, yeah, I think we're set. We've got our place sorted now. We've got, our visa. Thank you. We're learning the language. Kids are getting pretty good at it too. I think we're set. And she would just have them respond with, there's actually a lot more to it than that. I think you need to speak to the China success coach. She'd get on the phone with the easiest sale in the world. They were terrified to go. The company was motivated to pay, recommended by their attorney. She was able to charge $30,000 for this 5-week program, minus a $3,000 commission check. She made $27,000 for the easiest sale in the world, all by looking at the market differently and saying, how can I create a unique message based on my unique competencies and then specialize on a specific outcome? Everything else, like sales, becomes easy at that point, right? For instance, I say, I don't call myself a sales trainer, a marketing coach, or an introvert specialist. I say I'm the rapid growth guy. When I've worked in the MSP space, I had one guy that, really, he was just amazing at helping people understand that when you're going through growth through acquisition, you can't keep your cards close to your chest. You've got to get the CTO involved. Otherwise, there's licensing issues. There's, the CTO might have spent this whole time building a moat around the business. And next thing you know, he's got to find out he's got to build a superhighway between multiple different locations. So because of that, he called himself the acquisition lifeguard, right? Because by doing that, he was able to target CEOs that had growth through acquisition mindsets, like accountants that want to grow through books of business or manufacturing firms. So what I find is if you can create a unique message, then you can go into a networking room and instead of saying when somebody asks you what you do, I'm an MSP or I'm in data security, you can say I'm the acquisition lifeguard or I'm the downtime assassin or something like that that gets people to go, wow, that's interesting. What exactly is that? And that's the point. Once they ask, all of a sudden they have interest that they wouldn't have had when you say I'm from technology. And then how you respond to that is important, but having the opportunity to do it because they genuinely care and they asked changes everything.
I love it. That's brilliant. You took a commoditized business that could have been replaced with at $12 an hour to creating a great business. And I'm sure she's worth every dollar. Right. She's changing lives. And that's the only way to do it is to provide a service much bigger than language. Right.
Absolutely. And this is the thing that gets me because I see, especially in the technology world, and don't get me wrong, technology is complicated, right? So people spend a lot of time trying to learn all the tech and then they feel like it's their job. Well, firstly, they want to explain what they do and they use all the jargon words because what they do, it's like they hold out a Cheesecake Factory menu and they're like, well, do you want data security? Do you want this? 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 This, I do all of these things. And they're expecting the customer to know what they want. But the truth is, the customer doesn't know what they want. When you're networking, they don't know. What they want to do is be inspired that they're actually speaking to someone uniquely different. And then the second step is that people actually don't care what you do until they can see that you care. So what I always look at is people need to then learn how to convey passion and mission and then explain what they do in a story. Because while, especially everybody listening to this, I want you to know why you think it's your responsibility to educate a client to make an informed decision. That's actually not what your job is. Your job is to truncate that into a story so they can believe in you. And the ideal thing for you to do, the true definition of sales is it actually was derived from the Scandinavian term to serve. Best way to serve your clients is to get them out of their own way. And if you hit them with a bunch of jargon, all you're going to do is confuse them. You're not going to get them to go, you know what? I trust you. Let's move forward. Now, don't get me wrong. They'll have to trust someone eventually. But when you all hit them with jargon, then they're going to want to fight with you on price. So what you want to do first is you want to start by calling yourself something completely different so that you don't put yourself in the commodity box. Because if I was to say I'm a sales trainer, people look at me like I'm one step above a scam artist. If I say I'm in marketing, they go, oh, I need marketing. How much do you cost? That's worse, right? Because now I've got to try and dodge that because I've got to try and not talk about price straight away. So you need something that separates you. Then when you're in a networking room, if somebody says, oh, the rapid growth guy, that's interesting. What exactly is that? Well, you can think about the average technology provider right now. They might be talking, well, have you heard of CrowdStrike and what happened with CrowdStrike? And they might do that to try and avoid talking about the function. Or they might do an elevator pitch. I do this for this group of people, even if. That sounds horribly transactional. I hate that. What I suggest is lead with what you actually care about. For instance, I will respond with, well, one of the things I love to see more than anything in the world is an amazing introverted service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. But what I find, I just hate seeing this, is they usually get stuck in this endless hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, really feeling like people only care about one thing, price. Do you know anyone like that? Now, of course, I've researched the room before I've gone, so it feels like a bunch of pre-planned meetings. So when they respond in the affirmative, I will then say, well, I'm on a mission to help people like yourself realize you really can have a rapid growth business doing what you love, but not by getting better at your functional skill. You're probably amazing at that. Instead, by focusing on just 3 simple things outside the scope that allows you to build a business that revolves around you, your family, and your life, not the other way around. Think about what I just did. I didn't tell you what I did at all because people don't care. They care that you care and they care that you specialize in helping someone like them. Now, of course, eventually they're going to need to know. And that's why when I say just 3 simple things outside the scope of, what it is that you do that allow you to build a business that revolves around you, your family, and your life, not the other way around, I'll then look at them like I'm going to give them a functional jargon explanation, and you'll watch them freak out. And they'll be like, actually, you know what? Let me give you an example. See, Wendy was a language coach, and then I'll tell the story. Because again, they don't need to understand all the complexities of what you do. They just want to believe that you've helped people just like them.
Love it. It's funny. I think you and I talked about this the first time we spoke. I took a program at Stanford, and it was like these really cool classes I was super excited about. And like second semester, they asked me to take a storytelling class, and I was so annoyed. I told you this story. I'm like, are you serious? I'm paying all this money to learn how to tell stories. Like, how do I get through this class as soon? Not interested at all. It was the best class I took in the entire program because it was the only one that completely was out of my realm, right? It was like storytelling versus sitting there and trying to feed people data. People forget data. They remember stories. They remember your story. They want to tell their stories. So this is incredibly crucial. So I'd recommend anyone wanting to be great is learn how to tell your story.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that people, it's really interesting that it still surprises people that anyone selling a product or service, and a lot of people are like, well, I'm not in sales, I just own the business. Well, if you're the primary person that's selling the product, you're in sales, right? And so a lot of people aren't willing to admit they're in sales, even though they are, and that's preventing them from learning what they need. Now, the truth is, a lot of people listening were like, well, yeah, I am selling at the moment. My goal is to hire a salesperson, and then I won't need to be the one selling. Because a lot of the people listening might be in that size where they've maxed out their Rolodex, they've got a few $1 million business, and they're at that point where they now have to, in their mind, hire a salesperson to get to the next level. I promise you, if you hire a salesperson before you build a sales system, the only person that person will sell to is you. They'll talk to you about how amazing their pipeline is, how, we just got to treat these customers a little bit more delicately, give them a few more months. And then 6 months, 12 months will go by, you've blown $50,000 to $150,000 and you've got nothing out of it. And then you'll say, I'm the only one that can sell my product. And the answer is, if you go about it that way, you're absolutely right. Because the truth is that most people sell based on knowledge and passion. And those two things together, it doesn't sell well, but it sells better than someone that doesn't know what they're talking about.
Sure.
Now, when I talk about building a proper sales system, well, once you have a proper sales system and you know how to sell, using it, you can then hire someone and make sure they're using your system so you can qualify whether what they're doing is working or not. Plus, you have a good baseline of what's working and what's not. But I always suggest when you hire someone or when you're learning yourself, you start with a story. Because if you remove all the jargon and you convey what you do in a single story, people will be more inspired for a whole bunch of different reasons to buy from you. The first one is when you tell a story, science highlights that it actually activates the reticular activating system of the receiver's brain and the teller's brain. It creates artificial rapport. Now, if you struggle to create rapport like I do, then storytelling is your go-to because it leverages the storytelling to develop that rapport. The second thing is that it's been proven that people can remember up to 22 times more information when embedded into a story. And a lot of people will find that hard to believe. And I'll tell you an exercise I do when I speak from stage. I'll pick someone at random and imagine for a second, the people listening, that I picked you. And what I will say is I'm going to pick just 3 items at random, and I want you to remember them. Now, for those people listening, don't write them down, just remember them. Let's pick 3 things. You were making fun of the fact that Australians can't pronounce their R's prior to this episode. So let's go with one that has a real R in it. Chairs, the things you sit on, because clearly I can't pronounce them, right? Yep. So chairs, the things that we sit on. The second one is a lot of people are probably listening going, that's a good English accent. I'm from Australia, but let's go with a good English breakfast. I'm doing my best to help you visualize this and remember. Porridge would be the second one. And let's go with the third one, something simple, right? Like we got out of bed this morning, we'll go to bed tonight, something simple like beds. So chairs, porridge, and beds. Imagine if I then said to you, now, again, don't write these down, but I'm going to call you a year from now when you're in the middle of something. And I'm going to ask you what those 3 items are. I bet 99% of the time, people go, there's no way I'd remember those, right? If I called you out of the blue. But if I told you the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, you'd be like, oh, that's it. She sits in chairs, she eats some porridge, she sleeps in beds. When I do this at an event, everybody looks at me like completely blank until I say that, and they're like, instant recall. People remember so much more. So if you want them to remember your jargon, put it into a story. But the other thing is it short circuits the logical mind and speaks directly to the emotional mind, which is the buying center. Now, again, most people think when I say storytelling, I mean case studies and testimonials. I do not. Those are humble brags, and that is not what I mean at all. I mean a story that talks about this person that had a problem and how it was affecting her on both a real cost, an opportunity cost, but more an emotional cost level. How it was affecting her in this 3-dimensional way. And then, by the way, I suggest you spend like 35% of your time in that part, right? 20% in talking about the implementation because nobody cares. And then talk about the outcome in about 35% as well. Was the real cost realized? Was the opportunity cost realized? Is she now happier? Is he now happier? Did he get a promotion? Make them the hero and then deliver a moral of, so as you can see, they're very similar to you. They just decided to trust us in this way and we got in a great outcome. If you tell a story more like the story of how you met your spouse than a case study or testimonial, that will skyrocket your sales. And truthfully, it actually can truncate the whole sales process. What I've discovered is if you introduce a story, the sales process can go from this 7-step process with lots of things that you have to say and that awkward rapport thing that you have to do at the beginning with small talk. Truth is, since COVID, no one even wants any of that stuff anymore. They want a truncated process, but how do you develop rapport? And the answer is story. So if you introduce story into your sales process, then all of a sudden they've got this amazing unified message, your version of the China Success Coach, the downtime assassin. You've conveyed passion and mission, so they now know that you care. And then their logical brain's being short-circuited. You're speaking to the emotional brain, and through the reticular activating system, they're like, wow, I feel such a great connection to this person. And they remember what you say, which they've never felt with any other technology person before you. That's why sales and marketing can be so easy as long as you stop introducing yourself by your functional skill, then explaining things in ridiculous amounts of jargon, and then doing the same in the sales process.
Love it. Love it. In your book, which I see behind you, The Introvert's Edge, which I started reading already, it challenges the traditional kind of notions about sales and introversion, right? Like, what inspired you to write this book, and what are some common misconceptions of introverts, specifically in sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about what introversion is first. I think that's probably an important thing because, it's funny. A lot of people just don't know the answer. And actually, that's one of the biggest misconceptions is most people think introverts can't sell. So what was really interesting, I spoke at the AA-ISP Leadership Summit and, then I got asked to do this retreat for all the higher level leaders. And I just thought it'd be fun to ask if they were introverted or extroverted. people just didn't know. I mean, some people wrote introverted, some people wrote extroverted. Terrifyingly, some people went, oh, I was introverted, but don't worry, I'm not anymore. Like it was a disease that they had to recover from. The fact of the matter is, I mean, Zig Ziglar was an introvert. So if you think you can't sell or public speak, he did both pretty well, right? Now, if you think you are pretty bad at small talk, not that it's needed in sales anymore or networking, but the truth is Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman are both introverts. So, right, if you think you can't network, Ivan Misner, the founder of BNI, the world's largest networking group, also an introvert. So I think that most people see successful people and project extroversion upon them. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, right? Because a lot of people see poor Johnny as an introvert, so that we won't focus on helping them. We'll focus on the natural salespeople. And that's a big mistake. You're going to have a Zig Ziglar in your midst. Right. So the thing that I want people to understand is introversion simply is just where people draw their energy from.
Yes.
If you draw your energy by being by yourself, then you're introverted. If you charge up by being with other people, extroverted. Now, some people get confused because they're like, well, I used to find, it really exhausting going to networking events, but now I really enjoy them. Yeah, but are you tired afterwards? Not as much. Like I know that but when I first went to networking events, I found them mentally draining before, during, and after because I'd ruminate on what happened. But now I love my time networking. Doesn't mean I'm going to the pub with everybody afterwards, but I enjoy my time networking, but I am still a little tired afterwards. Not as much, but a little.
It sounds like for an introvert, it's like you're on during that time frame. Even if you're enjoying it, you're on. So when you're done, you're tired and want to almost de-energize or recharge by being alone. Correct?
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that's where people get it wrong because they're like, oh, I must be becoming more extroverted because it's not tiring me out as much, or I don't feel that tired afterwards. Still slightly tired, right? Now, people get it wrong with like public speaking. Everybody's scared of public speaking, right? Now, I find getting on stage and the first thing I do is tell a story. Everybody's brain's synchronized thanks to the reticular activating system. And now I feel calmer, right? So again, strategy can help with that. So why did I write the book? Well, the first book and on sales and the networking book were written for different reasons. The sales book was because I kept saying somebody should write a book on introverted sales. Like I didn't want to write. I had a reading speed of a sixth grade. The last thing I wanted to do was write a book. But I kept telling high-level influencers that I knew that somebody should write a book on introverted selling, and nobody thought there was a market for it. And I was like, how can this be? Like I'm speaking from stage, and people keep coming up to me going, Matt, I had no idea as an introvert that I could sell. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I'm like, there's thousands of books written for extroverts as far as the world's concerned. This is the only book on the market. So what happened was I actually worked with a ghostwriter that struggled to sell his package for $20,000. And I worked with him, and in the space of like 6 weeks, we'd put his prices up to we'd put his prices up from 20 to 40,000.
Wow.
And he'd closed 2 deals within 6 weeks. And by the end of the year, it was October, he'd made $120,000. He'd made 17 up until then.
It's in your book.
The following year, we put his price up to $50,000. He made $300,000. He now charges $130,000 for his ghostwritten books.
Wow.
And he's booked out till mid next year. So he was like, Matt, you need to put these ideas into a framework, into a book. And so he convinced me to do it. And I think if I had known the reality of, I may not have done it because he sends you 5,000 words. I listen to it with a robot voice because I can't read that well. And then I write 3,500 words of notes. Then we go to the next chapter. Then we go to the next chapter. Then he sends you the 50,000 word manuscript that I listen to with a robot voice. And I write 25,000 words of notes. It was a Herculean, and no one likes Zara's voice. I had to listen to it for days on end.
Wow.
The second book was really because there was a kid that picked up the sales book that was the father had left it on the coffee table, and he'd read the book cover to cover, and he decided that if I could systemize the sales process, he could systemize the process of making friends. The book's not even about that.
Wow.
And he carried it around at school, and he was like one of those kids that had the hoodie on, never made eye contact. Mm-hmm. The hoodie's gone. He's making eye contact, making friends with the popular kids. And then there was a girl in the picture. Now he's gone off to college. He's a happy kid. And I realize that so many people struggle with that dialogue, and it can be so systematic, especially in the networking room. And I just realized it had to be written. But I mean, I couldn't have predicted that it would have sold, 100,000 copies and be in 16 languages. It was just, nobody wrote a book on the fact that introverts have the edge when it comes to sales and networking, as long as they don't see themselves as second-class citizens. They just see that their path to success is different, and they lean into their natural gifts as opposed to being more extroverted or trying to be more extroverted, which is a recipe for disaster.
I think introverts could do really well in sales because they're less talkative typically. They listen more, especially in the beginning, and that makes a great salesperson. It's less about you; it's more about the person you're talking to and their story. So I think I always disagreed with that. I mean, I shouldn't say always, but I've got a very interesting guest coming up in the next month or so, Matt. And what he did is he was so shy, so introverted that he said, if I wanted to go outside, I checked to make sure my neighbor was not also going outside at the same time. I said, did you hate your neighbor? He said, not at all. I didn't know him at all. I was just nervous and anxious to even be in the same kind of hallway to have to communicate with this guy. And so he changed his life by systemizing ways to become not as shy and be willing to talk to people. Completely changed his life. He found himself his wife, and he said, I mean, it literally changed his life. He just decided one day that I am not going to be alone for the rest of my life, so I need to do something about it. I want life experience, so I have to do something about it. So there's an entire world of these wonderful people that are introverts, and they're definitely not diseased. They're brilliant, they're awesome, and they need to learn strategies to do what any of us can do.
Yeah, so the first thing is what's really, I find when you start to bring some of these amazing introverts, I guess you could say out of the darkness, because, I will say, a lot of people say, but Matt, you don't look introverted. And I'm like, what are we supposed to look like? Are we supposed to be these people hiding under bridges? I don't understand that, right? But the truth is, most people have this view of an introvert that they live indoors, they don't talk to many people. And the truth is that a lot of the successful people the people that know of that are listening today, I mean, a lot of them are introverted. You just projected extroversion upon them. Yeah. And that's the thing that you need to kind of get your headspace out of. And look, I will say that, a lot of people now say, well, and if you feel like this, I really want you to change that. A lot of people will say, oh, I'm now extroverted. You can't change who you are. Like if you've learned these strategies, outwardly say you're an introvert, inspire other people to do the same. I founded National Introverts Week. It's the third week of March every year. And I do that predominantly to get people to outwardly say I'm an introvert, because it surprises some people. And you see the responses, no, you're so talkative. There's no way you're an introvert, right? And I feel like it's a really important dialogue point. But then there are also a lot of introverts that say, oh, I've heard of this thing called ambiversion, and I feel like I am that now. And I'm like, no, you're an introvert that's learned great strategies and techniques to be really leverage your ability to empathize, your active listening skills, your preparation and planning skills. And now because of that, things take less of your own energy. But please still call yourself an introvert, because if we keep losing people from our club because they think they're someone else, then there's no one to inspire the youth and those other people like that guy that you were talking to get out of their houses and learn systems and processes. Because, I mean, think about it. If I didn't lose my job just before Christmas, I probably would have been really happy being a data entry person. I would never have given up this life for that. No way. Now, I'm not saying for those people that are listening that don't want to run their own businesses or be salespeople or be leaders, that they need to step into these skill sets. But my gosh, there are so many people that have businesses and they're not making the money they deserve or the profit they deserve because they keep getting beaten down on price just because they think sales isn't possible for them, or they can't network, or they're not great public speakers. They can't get on podcasts. And none of that is true. They've spent so long learning their functional skill. If they just add an element of effort to this and believe in themselves, they really can. And I will say also, because I don't want to extrovert bash here, the fact of the matter is extroverts, a lot of them really struggle because they're not the best listeners. They're not the most empathetic, and that's a challenge for them. And just as much as introverts need to learn the process, extroverts need those skill sets. Active listening and empathy are skill sets that you can learn. I think the big difference is extroverts believe they can learn them through coaching. Introverts believe that there's a barrier to entry because they just don't have that natural gift of gab. And that's where the real problem is.
Interesting. Matt, tell me a little bit about, with your background, like what do you see the future of entrepreneurship, specifically with the technology changing how we communicate?
It's really interesting with everything that I'm seeing. I feel that Firstly, I mean, social media has changed the way people sell, and it's actually becoming so much more introvert friendly because these days, a lot of the techie stuff that you can do to get sales phone calls, to get leads, has really enabled a lot of introverts to do very well. I will say also that for someone like me, for instance, one of the things I hear all the time is, Matt, I just see how active you are on social media, and there's no way I can be that active. I don't even turn on social media. I just batch created a whole bunch of stuff, and it auto posts, right? So again, as an introvert, you can learn to leverage technology really to get your ideal clients to chase you. So that's really powerful. And for an introvert, that's great. I mean, even for an extrovert, you don't want to be thinking about checking your phone and responding to someone all the time. Like, oh, this just happened. For the average person, and for me as well, because I was pretty proud about learning how to sell, and I didn't like the online space because it was like a thing that didn't really connect with my ego that I'd created myself. I thought that online was a bunch of people taking photos of their dog or donut for something to say online. And the truth is, it's shifted because it's the same problem in the networking room. If you can't be the clearest, you have to be the loudest. And it's the same in online. If you can't be the clearest, then you have to be posting on social media every 10 minutes. Look at me, I'm still here, I'm still here. But if you have a clear message, you can be the clearest, not the loudest, and you don't have to work so hard. And I think that's really important. I will say also that I feel the biggest hurdle, risk factor, is that a lot of people try and avoid, introverts specifically, try to avoid ever having to get on a phone call. Now, in the technology space, that's less likely, but I see a lot of tech, when they hire people and founders, they try and sell via email. And that is a horrible thing to do.
I agree.
But I also see people all the time, like introverts will say, oh, Matt, I really want to rapidly grow my business. Can you help me with the messaging? Because I see that as important. And then I'm going to build it into a webinar or some form of online product so that I never have to talk to someone. And I'm like, you can't do that. Like, you have to first validate that it works. Like Ryan Dice, who was on my podcast, The Introvert's Edge, he talked about the fact that they created a whole new product. And like, he founded an event called the Traffic and Conversion Summit. Ryan's amazing. Like, he won't speak at an event. He spoke on my stage in Austin. He won't speak at an event unless there's a back entrance so he can walk in and walk out, because he's like, I'm not scared of speaking anymore. I'm scared of being pummeled when I walk downstairs with all the people running over me. So he launched a new product, and he said, I said that I would be standing over in the back answering any questions people had. He goes, that was the worst 3 days of my life. I had 100 conversations. He said, but I knew exactly what to say to get them to buy, exactly what to say that would not get them to buy, and all the things that they needed to motivate them, what words to use, exactly everything. And that's the thing that I find, like a lot of people, they try and automate everything straight away. Yeah. And that's a crazy thing to do. What you need to do is automate your outreach strategy, your connection strategy, your social strategy, but you need to get them on the phone calls, and you need to get them on the phone calls with you. Because then you can practice the sales process and perfect the sales process. Then you can put a salesperson in charge. And now you've got a salesperson and you're proving that success. And then you say, well, can I automate the entire sales process without even having me on the call or somebody else on the call, which makes you monstrously more scalable, especially now that you've got, AI phone call operators, AI messaging services, and statistically the younger people are changing dramatically. I mean, my sister works as a general manager of a mortgage broking company, and people are even willing to pay a higher interest rate if it means they don't have to speak to someone. Wow. Mind blowing. So the market is shifting. So you want to validate the message in face-to-face dialogue, but then you want to automate it as quickly as possible.
Sure.
And so that's where I see the use of technology shifting things. I feel like that technology is making it easier for us, but it's also putting up a risk factor of us using it 100% from the beginning, where we don't really understand, especially when we start a brand new business. And for those people that got $5 to $10 million businesses that all you've done is leverage your Rolodex, you still have no idea why those people would actually buy from you. So you need to get cold leads. You need to call your customers to find out what specifically that's unique about you that allows them to work. And when you say it's nothing, I promise you it is something. There's something seriously valuable that you offer. Otherwise, every time somebody offers a cheaper price, they would jump. And absolutely. I promise you, I know you're going to say it's about the relationship you have. That's your ego talking. There is no way they like you enough to pay $1 more. Well, that's not true. A couple of dollars, $100 more, because at the end of the day, they're in business.
Matt, I agree with you. I find that emails and text messages are very transactional. Even if you can sell that way, I don't think it's scalable and it's not sustainable. I don't think, so in our business, we're a technology consulting and recruiting firm. The initial 2 or 3 interactions need to be in person or on a Zoom call. After that, absolutely. Small confirmations, emails, text message, I don't care. But we insist on someone showing up and showing us who they are, right? And for them to see who we are. And once you have that, the relationship just flows, right? Because you've built this relationship. I really push to meet people in person, which is challenging. Our worlds have changed. We went from a regional player to a national, almost global company. So you have to utilize at least video. But man, it's terribly expensive it's terribly ineffective to never talk to people or meet them. All digital, all emails. I agree. What we're trying to do with AI and other technology is to get rid of as many manual, boring, unnecessary steps so that we spend more time doing what you and I are doing, right?
Absolutely.
That's where I think the juice is. Tell me a little bit about this small business festival. I heard it's a huge success.
The festival was something that I launched years ago, really because I feel that most small businesses don't spend enough time getting outside their functional skill. Like if you're a recruitment service, you go to your local, association for recruitment firms, and if you're an MSP, you go to the local MSP meetups and groups and things like that. And what I found is too few people went to actually learn the things outside the scope of their functional skills. So it was an idea I had, funnily enough, in Austin when the first 2 years I was there, and I decided there needed to be an event that happened during National Small Business Week that got small business owners there's a big difference between the mindset of an entrepreneur and a small business owner, right? But mostly small business owners, because I feel like there's a lot of startup weekends and things for entrepreneurs. Really small business owners out of their offices and learning things from people that provide amazing content, and providing them actionable tools that actually allowed them to go and implement things in their business that change their business. And, there's, I just spoke at Total Marketing Toolkit, for instance, and, that's a group of MSPs that all get together to talk about marketing, and that's kind of good. But you got to go to other groups that are learning best practices that aren't all that everybody else isn't doing. Otherwise, it's the definition of commodity, right? So you want to follow some of the best practices. You want to do some of the standardization stuff, but you also need new and unique ideas. And so I decided Small Business Festival could be that. And funnily enough, I came up with the idea 60 days before National Small Business Week. We launched the event, and we got a ton of sponsors. We ended up with 100 speakers, including the founder of billion-dollar brand UGG Boots, Ryan Dice, Ryan Moran, Jamie Masters, the host of Eventual Millionaire, Ivan Meisner. We got some amazing people that just came and spoke at the event. We had 5,000 people attend, and it got listed by Inc. as the number 3 conference in America for small business, which was amazing. So the second year we were in multiple states, and I feel like we're making a difference. And I will say that we got a proclamation of thanks from the governor's office and from the city of Austin. And the mayor of Austin said there are 3 things. It's pretty cool. 3 things in Austin that we're most proud of: South by Southwest, ACL, and Small Business Festival. So, we were delighted that we were able to create something for the Austin economy, because truthfully, the Austin economy, it's kind of the rock star of small business cities. Absolutely. Right? They put a whole bunch. I wrote an article actually called, Austin, the rock star of small business cities, because they do so much. And I will say there are other towns like Sacramento, like Nashville, that are doing some really great stuff for entrepreneurship. And, but I do feel that that in what I've seen, and I'm starting to see that change, which is great, because entrepreneurs and small business owners are starting to become the cool kids. But in America, a lot of people protect their friends and family members from starting a business because they're worried about them going wrong. But a lot of times that means that they don't feel supported.
Sure.
And, people keep saying, go get a safe job. So the problem is that when the entrepreneurs actually become successful, what they do is they look at everyone else and say, well, you didn't really support me. I'm not going to give anything back. But in Austin, because it's the live music capital of the world, the pinnacle of small business, right? So because of that, they have this camaraderie with the people that have become successful. So it was really easy for me to get the high achievers to come and help the people that really needed the practical skills to get started. So for me, it was more of a give back because I just care about small business.
Amazing. Love Austin. I was there, I think, last year or the year before. Went to South by Southwest, and I was at all the Inc. events, and just a lot of fun. I'm surprised I missed you. When is the next one? When's the next event?
Well, actually, we did it up until COVID, unfortunately. So we ran the events up until COVID. We thought about running them virtually, and we may bring it back out in the future. But unfortunately, my brand exploded. And because of that, I'm just crazy busy. So I still have dreams of relaunching it. And, we've always had people that are asking, and we may do it. There's just a lot of work in live events, unfortunately. And these days,
a lot of work.
We do see the ability to, these days I get the ability to touch people's lives in such a different and far more leverageable way. And so that's the other thing. What we discovered is that it was really, really important to work with people to get them to the total outcome. And while Small Business Festival did bring people into the dialogue, which was great, it was a 1 week and then they all went back to their day jobs. So I've been a lot more focused on creating content that helps people get from the beginning all the way through the end. And I've just decided that my books, the podcasts that I do, things like that, they have a much larger, more leverageable yield. And especially like we were talking about with the introduction of AI, it allows us to curate our content, because I believe that it all has to come out of my head, but massively create that content at speed. AI has helped us with that, splitting up videos, doing shorts, a whole bunch of things that get people into the more detailed dialogue we provide in the books, the programs, and things like that.
Matt, it's been great. Tell us where people can find you, how they can, take advantage of your expertise. This is such an important topic. I mentor and invest and advise dozens of startups, and the biggest thing I see with them is they've got a brilliant product with no one to buy it, and they usually flail out and have a very small exit, or there's nothing there, right? And they pivot from one industry or one target market to another until they realize that there's nothing here, and all because they don't know how to sell, all because they're technical folks or introverts, or where do they find you? How do they learn from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I appreciate you asking. So, for those people that are listening, truthfully, you don't need to hire me for these outcomes. You can go to MatthewPollard.com/growth. There, I give you a template to create your unified message, your version of the China Success Coach, the Rapid Growth Guy, and discover your niche of willing to buy clients. And to put this in, I did this as a workshop for a group of about 200 people not long ago. And at the end, I said, put your hand up if you now believe you've got a unified message that'll excite and inspire people to want to know more, and you've identified a niche of willing and wanting to buy clients. And 97% of the room put their hands up. And then I said, well, just do me a favor, keep your hands up if this is the most time you've actively spent working on your marketing. I'm not talking about listening to podcasts and reading 1,000 books. I'm talking about actually doing the work. The sad part was 85% of the room kept their hands up. The whole session was only 90 minutes long. So the key is this will absolutely work for you, but you've got to spend the time doing it. And what I would suggest is send this episode to a friend of yours that is not in your industry. So if you're in technology, send it to a florist or a chiropractor or a business coach. Get them to listen to it and spend about an hour on them, and get them to spend about an hour on you. And download that template at MatthewPollard.com/growth, and you will transform the way you articulate your value. Now, for those people that are interested in my books, you can get the first chapters for free at the Introverts Edge to Networking.com or the Introverts Edge, which is the salesbook.com. And truthfully, my publisher hates me when I say this. You don't need to buy my books to get to the outcome. Like with the sales book, for example, if you do nothing more than grab the 7 steps from the sale and grab what you currently say and put it into it, you'll quickly realize there's some things out of order. There's some massive gaps. Fill those gaps, and there's some things that don't fit. Throw that out. You shouldn't be saying it to customers. If you do that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days, especially once you read the irrefutable evidence in the first chapter about why introverts make amazing salespeople. Wow. But yeah, feel free to check out the books. And if you have a question, you're always welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn and send me an audio message. For those people that don't know they can send audio messages, discover how. It's one of the best ways to outreach to people right now, because no one knows how to do it. So when you send somebody an audio message, they're blown away, and so they respond. And the first thing they'll do is respond to what your question was, and then they'll ask you how you did that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show. Looking forward to meeting you one of these days in person. Thank you for dropping so much knowledge our way, and see you around.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avita Santablian, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook. Keep leading, keep learning, keep giving, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, stay inspired, my friends.